Hello and welcome to Conscious Miami. This podcast is part of our mission to guide you along your spiritual journey, whether it be a spiritual awakening, a journey through the dark night of the soul, or just your ongoing commitment to spiritual growth and discovery. This is also part of our mission to facilitate authentic connections between spiritually minded people across the United States and the world, starting right here in our home city of Miami. I am Seth Sherpak, a natural law shaman practicing here in Miami, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Eric Kramer, who is going to kick us off by introducing the theme of today's show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm doing my cozy comfort today, if you're watching the visual podcast, because today we are letting go, surrendering, and that just sounds all sorts of peaceful. So
Awesome.
I was told that you had some type of story today that's going to make this episode nice.
Yeah, but I don't know if I want to start right out with that because I'm going to need to build up some context for it. So why don't we start out by you give your definition of what it means to surrender and why it's important, and then I'll go next.
Why it is important to surrender? Well, if you're wanting to live more in that soft energy and that flow of life, which makes manifestation easier, it makes letting go of pain and trauma just significantly an easier process, and then surrendering and letting go is going to be your bread and butter. As far as letting go, it doesn't mean forgetting to me. It means understanding that things had to happen exactly as they did, and we get to learn the lesson, we get to grow from it, and we are able to actually decide like who we want to be. It's kind of like a self-discovery for me. What about you?
Beautiful. I think about letting go as really calling your power back to you, because when I work with people, what I'll typically talk about is their circle of control versus their circle of influence, which typically you care about your circle of influence, but there are things you can't directly control. And then outside of that, if you picture it like a bullseye, your circle of control is here. And there's very few things you can directly control, like your attitude, your actions, the training of your mind and of your will. Outside of that, there's a circle of influence. Those are things you can't directly control, but you can influence by controlling yourself. For example, you can influence another person. If you're, lose 50 pounds and get in really good shape, the person sees you do that and it influences them to follow your lead in that. But you don't directly control. You can't do their push-ups for them or get on their diet for them. On the outside circle, there's a circle of acceptance. And those are things that you can't influence or control. What I found is that when our lives get out of control, so we start caring too much about things that are outside our circle of control, and therefore our self-control, our ability to control ourselves shrinks. And so does our circle of influence. People don't trust us when it looks like we can kind of be bumped around by the circumstances, like the disappointments, the failures of our lives. And so it shrinks your circle of influence, your circle of control, and you feel even more helpless. And so to me, when I need to let go of something, I have mistakenly thought something was under my control or was under the control of something I understood better than I thought I did. I just accepting, I need to call my power back. I need to stop investing my hope so much into this thing that's either gone from my life completely or isn't going to turn out the way that I thought it was. And that energy, that focus, that will and intention that I've placed on that thing, now I'm calling it back to me in two ways. Number one, I'm calling it back to where I can use it to act within my circle of control. But I also think of it as a tie to that other person and that other thing or that other circumstance. It's like if there was a rope around my neck and then a rope around the thing that I can't let go of, every time it moves, every time the person who I'm attached to, whatever, does something I don't want them to do, or that I think they shouldn't do, or isn't aligned with my expectations of them, or the circumstances don't turn out the way I did, it's like it has the power to pull me in a different direction by getting me depressed, unmotivated, making me try to act on something that's in my circle of influence. And then it takes away all the power I have to stay centered and stay grounded. So to me, it's act. And that's how I rationalize it as a man, because a lot of men don't like the idea of surrendering and letting go, but you're really calling your power back to you. There's a second part, which I want to talk about a little bit later, but that's my definition of it.
So in the spirit of being in Miami, it reminds me of the ocean and like boats and sailing and anchors. Like the way I approached it was very much, okay, if you want to have this kind of flowy, peaceful life, you need to learn how to let go and surrender to the current, to the tide. Versus when you jumped in there, it reminded me of like an anchor. Like, okay, now I'm going to ground myself, I'm going to recenter myself, and the actual power that comes in the anchor, because the boat can't go anywhere if this huge chain and anchor is touching the bottom of the ocean. So I like it. It's like two very different approaches to the same concept, whether you want to go through the feminine side or the masculine side.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I was reading the Tao Te Ching earlier today. It's a book 11 of the Tao Te Ching where it talks about how there are 30 spokes that are joined together in a wheel, but that the wheel functions because of the hole in the center, the emptiness. And then it goes to a bunch of other examples where it talks about how we mold clay into a pot, but it's the emptiness on the inside of it that makes it useful. It talks about how we fashion wood and materials for a home, but it's the emptiness inside that makes it livable. And then it says we work with the substantial, but the emptiness is what we use. And a lot of time what happens is we work on something and we can only control how much energy we put into something. We can't control how the universe responds to us. All we can do is align ourselves with the laws that hopefully are going to bring it back. But we have to create the space, the emptiness for that thing to occupy. Otherwise, it's like the story about the monkey who reaches his hand into the coconut to get the stuff out. And when he tries to pull it out, he won't let go of it. And the hunter comes right up and grabs the monkey and traps him because the monkey can't let go of what's in the coconut. And it's the same way when we hold on to something. It's like there's space that needs to be occupied. There's space that needs to be open to receive the thing that we really want. And that can't happen if we're holding on to something else. And I think that's what it's talking about in the Tao Te Ching. It's that emptiness that really we fill our lives with abundance and with peace, with all the things that we really want by letting go of the things that we can't control or the things that don't serve us.
Do you feel like that's more like allowing, or do you think that falls into the detachment category?
I'm not sure I understand the difference, but I have a feeling you're going to tell me.
So I have this beautiful equation that I call the polarity equation, and it's for trying to manifest your goals. And maybe I'll put it like in the show notes because I have an actual infographic of it. But essentially, somebody is trying to manifest something, whether they call it manifestation or they call it a dream or a goal. That's completely interchangeable. But that's the end. That's after the equal sign, we have arrived. Well, in my research and in my opinion and what I've seen through clients is there's a couple of steps. We're doing some math to be able to get to that goal. And it starts with desire, which is part of the law of attraction. It's part of that electrical output where we're like, I would like this to happen. And that's step one. Most people are really good at knowing what they want when it comes to their desires. And they're like, I would like to have more money, or I would like to, get in a beautiful relationship. Well, then we have two more things that come into play before we actually get to manifestation. Because if it was as easy as like, here's my desire, now I have it, then I don't think we'd have a purpose to life, to be honest with you, because we just immediately get everything we want. We'd probably be very bored all the time. But we have what I would say is allowance and then resistance. So to kind of make our equation real quick, desire plus allowance plus resistance equals your manifestation. Now, most people are not actually that great at allowing their goals and their dreams to come to them. They try to force them, or they can't let go of something previously. And that's where resistance comes in. Whenever we're resisting the system, we will allow it to be able to fluctuate naturally. But if you increase the resistance, then now you can't actually achieve your goals. You have something blocking you, like an energetic tie or something from like trauma or resistance in time. So time is probably the most natural resistance that we have in this entire equation because we can't tell you how long a manifestation is going to take. So surrendering and letting go to kind of revisit is part of, okay, are you going to have more allowance, or are you increasing the resistance in your manifestation process? So detachment would be, okay, I'm decreasing the resistance, versus allowing would be like, I'm letting go and surrendering. But that's in my opinion. So I'm trying to see where you're at.
Well,
Those
I'll
are
just give you
science.
things like I occasionally, like once a year, I'll take an inventory of the past few decades of my life and figure out like what are the biggest mistakes that I made and the things that I need to correct. And the first time I ever did that, I looked back and I said, the by far the most damaging thing that I've done in my life is stayed attached too long to things that I should have cut a long time ago. Most of the time it was a relationship that I stayed committed to, knowing that the person didn't value me, didn't care about me, but I have like this kind of Puritan ethic where you stay committed to somebody once you've committed to them, even if they're ruining you. I mean, that's what I was raised with. And so the thing is, I started thinking, okay, the 3 years, the 8 years, the 5 years, the 10 years that I spent with this person trying to make things work, obviously I'm not out looking for another person. I'm not available for another person. I'm going to have to go through a grief period months after this whole thing is over. And all that time and energy that you invest into what you're trying to make work that isn't actually part of your manifestation, it's like that's not leaving space for the other thing to show up, which I've noticed sometimes when, as soon as you let go of the thing you're holding on to, a lot of the time the thing will show up. So I don't know if it's the same thing that you're talking about, but there is a surrender in that, because I think that's different than surrender to me, because to me, it's you're letting go of the thing that, okay, you thought was your manifestation. You thought was your person. They came into your life and it's like, okay, it's that. But then there's also surrendering to how it's going to happen. For example, let's say that I'm trying to build a business and I'm going out on LinkedIn every day and I'm prospecting for clients. No, nothing's coming back to that channel. But I found that through the law of compensation, if you put energy out there, the same type of energy is going to come back to you through another channel. And what typically will happen is a person can spend hours and hours a day prospecting on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden someone they haven't talked to in 3 years calls them up and wants to hire them for a project that they spoke to them 3 years about. It's completely tangential and out of nowhere, but the energy that you put out there through that one channel caused it to come back. But if you're too attached to it happening a certain way, you're not going to accept those other opportunities. You're not going to be looking for them. You're going to be thinking, damn, why isn't this thing I'm doing on LinkedIn working? It's I might as well just quit. You know, it's this is how it's supposed to happen. This is where it's supposed to come through. And then maybe after the person comes in through some tangential way, you go, well, that was just luck, right? Nothing that I did, none of the energy that I put out towards that intention actually made a difference, and I have no control over what happens in my life. And so you still haven't really learned the lesson, because you haven't surrendered the how and said, well, it didn't happen how I wanted it to, but the exact thing that I wanted to did happen.
Very holistic approach. I remember listening to a motivational speaker, and something that really stuck with me is how is like none of your business. Like how something happens, how something's developed is none of your business. Your business is to know what you want and to show up. So,
yes. And if it's something you've never had before, this is probably one of the hardest lessons I've had to learn as a logical person. If you've never had it, you don't know how to get it. And how you think you're supposed to get it is probably wrong, because that's what Einstein said. You can't solve a problem using the same thinking that created it. If you've never made more than $100,000 a year, you don't know how to do it. And what you think needs to be done to do it is wrong. What you're doing every day to try to make it happen is wrong. So if you get too attached to the how you're attached to literally can't make the thing happen that you're hoping. What the universe can do, and I admit that I don't understand exactly how this works, but what it can do is if you put the energy and the intention out there, then that energy is going to act on the universe in a way to where the universe goes, okay, I know that if I knock this domino over, that it's going to knock that domino over, and that one and that one and that one. And all of a sudden someone's going to pick up their phone and call this person who's been looking for, out dating, trying to find their soulmate, trying to find business, whatever it is. The universe knows the shortest and easiest and most energy efficient way to bring the thing into your life, but you don't know it, and you shouldn't know it if you've never accomplished it before. That's called the law of compensation, which I admit it's a very weird thing, but I've seen it happen many times. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story of someone who I worked with about 2 years ago. He was stuck making like 20K a month and he wanted to get over 100K a month. And he didn't know, he thought he had exhausted every possibility. He was running paid ads. He was doing everything he thought that he should be doing. And so he just didn't know what to do. So he wasn't doing anything. And I just told him, get up every morning, set the intention in your head to make $100,000 a month and just prospect on LinkedIn because that's worked before. And I told him about the law of compensation. And about 3 months later, what happened in the next 3 months was just miraculous because his paid ads started exploding and he started making like 120K a month through his paid ads. I still don't know how that happened, but I think the universe was looking at his efforts saying, okay, we got energy going out there to create this result, but it's not going to happen in the channel he's pushing the energy through. It's going to happen through this other channel. And so that's how it happened. But if he had still been attached to the idea of, everything that I've done should have produced the result and it hasn't, he would have stayed stuck and never surrendered to the idea that, what, all I got to do is put the energy out there and surrender to how it's going to happen and the universe will take care of it. And it did.
So how did he, for the how's sake, surrendering also is a very emotional process. And it is easier to surrender whenever there's not like an agenda or a timeline or like the pressures that come being in life. So I could very much see somebody being like, I would love to surrender. I would love to let go, but I have bills to pay. I have a family to support. Like, I am trying my best to keep everything together. And you're telling me to let go. You're telling me to surrender to the process. What do you do whenever there's like a timeline on that? Or like important things that are relying on you?
I've been in that position before. And I will admit that if I'd heard somebody say what I'm about to say, I'd be pissed off at them. But this is true. Number one, I have seen God meet a bill that I needed met all the way down to the dollar. Like I can remember specifically one time when I needed $1,420 to move into this new place. And I didn't have a job at the time. And 1,000 of it came through one unexpected source, 400 came through another, and $20 came through another. It was just freaking crazy. So the universe has always found a way to make sure, or God has always found a way to make sure that I have what I need to survive. But if you do end up losing the house or losing the car or can't pay the bill, or if your credit card's late, or if your credit takes a hit, that if you stay focused on your intention, as hard as this is to hear, whatever bad thing happens is going to be part of those dominoes knocking over that's eventually going to lead to the thing you want. What happens to a lot of people is they start seeing these bad things happen and they don't realize the universe is lining things up and working all things together for good, like the Apostle Paul says. And you're like, fuck, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that's where the attachment happens. It's like, what I've done should have been enough. They'll tell God or tell the universe, whatever, that should have been enough to make it happen. And why did you let this happen to me? Instead of seeing it as part of the bigger plan, which is really hard to do. I'll totally admit that. But part of it is just knowing that if you stay focused on your intention and you don't like get too attached to it happening a certain way, eventually everything will line up. There just may be some really not so pleasant things that happen in the meantime. Which I admit doesn't emotionally help somebody to hear that who's under a lot of pressure, but that's where faith comes in. I mean, surrender is when you let go of it, not knowing how or when it's going to happen. If you knew, it wouldn't be surrender. It would just be waiting until it happened.
In yoga, they say that the root of all suffering is attachment. So would you consider surrendering kind of the ailment to that, like the medicine?
I think there's more to it than that.
Okay.
I'd like to hear your take on this too, but I think here's what happens. This is personally what's happened to me and I've seen happen to people is it's this paradoxical relationship between really wanting something so bad that you can focus your intention. And you said you started with desire, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you reconcile desire and surrender? It seems like a paradox, but the thing that you desire has an essence, and it's not going to show up exactly the way that you want it to, but it has an essence. Like, for instance, let's say there's a type of person that you want to have in your life, and maybe when they show up, they have a different color eyes than you thought they would, or different color hair. Maybe they're a little bit shorter, or maybe they have a quirk in their personality you weren't expecting. And you might go, that's not the person because I don't like that about them. But if you look at the essence of what you're asking for, it's like the essence has the capacity to bring you joy, to bring you peace, to bring you a feeling of belonging and validation. That might happen to someone who looks a little bit different than the person who's on your list, whether it's a client or a romantic partner. But what happens is, I think we need to have the desire for the essence of the thing and the detachment from the instance of it. Because let's say somebody shows up and they check everything on your list, right? But they don't want to do business with you, or they don't want to date you, or whatever it is. You got a choice that you can keep your intention focused on the essence of what you wanted, which that person carried with them with the exception of one thing. Or you can say, no, this specific instance is how it's supposed to happen. This is the person it's supposed to happen to. This is the business it's supposed to happen to. This is the event that's supposed to sell out and make me rich. This is my soulmate, whatever it is. Now we've moved from the heavenly realm where we're focused on the essence of the thing to the specific thing itself. Like, there's an essence to an animal called a dog, right? And dogs have very specific character traits. When, like, my dog Agape has very specific personality traits. I can tell you exactly what he looks like, down to the color of his eyes, his fur, his personality quirks. But on a higher realm, there's this essence of this thing called a dog that we understand that Agape is a dog, right? Well, if I want a dog in my life that has the energy that Agape had, I can wish for a dog like that. And Jasper's a lot like Agape, but he's got a lot of specific things about him, like the color of his fur, his eyes, some of his personality quirks that don't match Agape's. So if I just stay attached and said, that's not Agape, he's not Agape, he's not my dog, he's not the dog I wanted, I've now moved from wanting the essence of it to being attached to a specific instance. And that's where scarcity sets in, because it's like, it can only happen to this person. It can only happen to this business. It can only happen to this client. It can only happen by the end of this month. And that's where you start to suffer, because then you're moving out your circle of control. You can't control someone else's actions. So that's a really, really painful place to be when you're attached to the specific instance of a thing, but you can always move back up and say, okay, what was the essence of what I wanted? It didn't have this person's name, eye color, occupation, whatever it is, but you release that, you detach from it, but the desire for the essence remains the same. I hope I explained that right.
I'm going to go very metaphysical on us here, which is nice because the last 2 episodes I've been more Western-minded. So it's going to be a little bit of a flip of the script. But what you're relating to is working in the 8th dimension versus the 3rd dimension. And in metaphysics, we would call this waves versus particles, or basically a massive amount of possibilities versus this one finite absolute. So with the idea of having the dog, right? Jasper was a manifestation, and he was a manifestation through years of work. And I was at the point, I was in my early 20s, I was still traveling in abundance, and I couldn't actually have a dog, but I knew for a fact that I wanted to have a golden doodle. Now, in my mind, I wanted a golden doodle that was apricot, that had caramel eyes, and that was a girl. And for those of you all that are really obsessed with golden doodles like me, I wanted an F1. I did not want an F2. And we are not talking about racing. But I was just like, in my mind, when I envisioned having a dog, that was it. And as I went along, I would actually point out golden doodles across the street and be like, hey, golden doodle, and just kind of bring that energy back into like focus of like, that's going to be my dog one day. Whereas as the years went by, and it's like 4 years later, I was like, okay, I'm getting closer to the ability to allow the presence of a dog in my life. I was more grounded. I had a house. I was, more developed in my career. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to start a different level of this allowance and actually tell the universe that I'm ready for a dog by collecting, classic piggy bank style, like little like amounts of money every single day that I got from the stores or I found. I just would throw it in there and called it Jasper. So now I've actually labeled that, but still have no idea. I'm surrendering to the idea that this dog can come from anywhere. Golden doodles, people think that they have to be bred and that they have to come from farms. And I really didn't like the idea of getting a dog from a farm. So with that, fast forward to everything. Jasper looks nothing like what I envisioned, right? Just like you and your mate, like maybe you had like this idea that she's gonna look a certain type of way or have a certain accent, XYZ. Jasper is jet black. And he has really beautiful eyes, but they're not caramel. And he's a man. He's not even a woman. But he is literally the best manifestation I could have had for a dog. Matches me perfectly for what I need. And that's the beauty of surrender, is the universe, God, knows way better what you actually need versus what you think that you want. And if you can let go of the matter, that finite, it has to be this way, you actually open yourself up to the opportunity of having what you really need, what you actually are going to thrive and having in your life. So I can imagine having a better dog, but at the end of the day, it's kind of funny to think that my mind wanted this so much that it wasn't until I started letting that process go of just being like, I just want the best dog for me. I would love for it to be a golden poodle. I would love for it to be these traits, but I'm not going to be like, it has to be this way. I'm going to surrender to the way. And the story getting Jasper is a complete other type of beautiful manifestation surrender. But I'm going to get back on track. I could talk about my dog all day long.
That's a beautiful story. And it's exactly what I was talking about. I was going to call it the Platonic realm, because Plato believed that there was a categorical essence of a dog, an essence of a cat, an essence of a person somewhere in an invisible realm, and that we were all like instantiations made from the essence of those things. But that's a great example of being wanting the essence of it and not the instance of it, because the instance wasn't at all what you expected. And what I'll add to that what happens to some people is kind of the reverse, where you're really focused on the essence of what you want. You've got the list of things or the image in your head. Then something or someone shows up that you think matches those things. And now you've got all this extra detail, including the person's name, their background, their biography, their eye color, their height. And if you grow attached to that, what happens is you won't allow anything else to come in that doesn't match that. Now, you've updated the thing you have a desire for, but you haven't done it according to the essence of a thing. It's this specific person now. And now your consciousness and your will and what the Hermeticists call the generative principle of care, which is awareness. If you want to talk about quantum physics, we know that wherever we put our awareness is what causes the wave to collapse to a particle. So you got your awareness stuck, hung up in this collapsed version of a thing, this instance of it, this dog or this person or whatever that has all these specific qualities. Now you've collapsed every possibility of the essence of what you want to one thing. And if it doesn't happen, that's when suffering happens. Grief, like depression, anger, mistrust of self and mistrust of the higher power and all those things. And that can happen with anything that you want. So I think that's a really good example. It's like there's the desire for the essence of the thing in the eighth dimension, as you call it, but there's the surrender in this dimension of what it's actually third dimension of what it's going to look like when it shows up.
That expectation increases the resistance. If you go back to the equation, like the more resistance in the system, whether it's physics or it's the real world, like physics is in the real world, but for the analogy's sake, like people will feel that. Like, let's say that you're hung up on somebody and you're like, it has to be him. And perhaps even the universe has given you every sign in the world that that is your soulmate, that that's your partner. But again, when you attach it, those people like recognize emotions, they recognize chemicals, they recognize their own intuition. Even if they feel the same way and you're already in a relationship with them, they can feel that pressure. And when you add pressure to a system, immediately, even if everything is going well, you kind of freak out. And that still slows down, will still slow down the process. I'm getting so emotional about this. I love it.
No, I hope people are listening to this and they're starting to see where they've made this mistake, because we've all done it. But if you want to talk on a specific biochemical realm, people can, there's a great book about this. I think it's called The Source or something like that. It's a neuroscientist who teaches that when we leak cortisol into our bloodstream, it actually leaks out through our sweat and our body heat. And when a person's close enough to us, they can feel fear. And fear comes from the desire, the scarcity, and thinking something may not turn out the way that you want it to. The person, even if they're not consciously aware of it, their biochemistry picks up on it, and they don't want to be around you because of that. And so you're right, you end up driving the person away, and they may not even know. They may give you some weird reason they don't want to be around you anymore. They may just ghost you. But that's what's happening in the chemical realm. It's this attachment to this outcome and this sense of scarcity. I think what's interesting about that, this will bring us back to the story I was going to tell. I met some gentleman at a kava house a couple of days ago who had just gotten into a new relationship and was kind of started asking me about it because he found out about what I did. And he got into this back and forth with her where he was trying to explain, he was going to have a period of financial uncertainty in his life over the next year because he's starting a business. And he told her about it. And he's like, I may not be, the man that I need to be for you over the next 6 months because of this. And she comes back and starts talking like she wants to end the relationship, which I know you know why she did that, but she didn't know. So what he wanted to do was to come back and explain himself and apologize. And I'm like, dude, that's just going to make it worse. You're not dealing with logic here. She's afraid that the mountain, the rock you were going to be in her life, the space you were going to hold for, you're basically saying, hey, I can't do it. And not only can I not hold space for you and be a man right now, the reason I can't do it is because of an external circumstance like financial uncertainty. And immediately, whether she's consciously aware of it, and I don't care how spiritually awake the woman is or not, this is immediately what happens in her mind. She thinks 10, 20, 30 years ahead, I'm going to have kids with this guy. We're going to have financial uncertainty. We're going to have all kinds of chaotic things come into her life, including the kids themselves. This guy can't handle it because he basically is like a cork bobbing around in the ocean. He's so attached to this outcome of being able to provide financially that he feels less of a man and feels a need to show her, hey, tell her I'm not going to show up as a man because of that. And so the mistake that I kept him from making, I just said, look, just stop. Don't say anything else to her. Don't explain. Don't apologize. You made a mistake, but the worst thing you can do is act like you owe her an explanation. What you need to do is come back to your center, bring your power back to you, let go of the attachment to her and for the relationship to go a certain way. Just let her think about it for a while. And I had him text back something like, I understand maybe you need some space. Right now, text me back because I really love to see you. If you want to, give things a try, I want to talk about this. That was it. No explanation, no apologies, none of that. And he just texted me today saying that pretty much put things back together. And with her, now what he's got to do is make sure that he doesn't disclose every single doubt and uncertainty. Like if there's a dragon at the front door of the castle, you don't want to lie and tell the princess that it's not there. But what you don't want to tell her is that, the arm I use to swing my sword has been hurting really bad lately. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to defeat this dragon and it's probably going to come in here and kill us. What she wants to hear is I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do every fucking thing I can to protect you from what's out there, even if it means giving up my own life and burning down this entire city to keep you safe. That's what she wants to hear. But it took letting go of the need. And he thought he was being authentic and transparent and bonding with her by telling her all these things. But what I showed him is that you're too attached to having to get her approval for how you're going to act over the next 6 months, and you don't. So I think that was an example of that. And that's a lesson for the men. It's like there are certain things that you have to just let go, right? The one is your financial situation. No matter how bad it gets, you have to go back to your circle of control, call your power back to you and go, you know what? I cannot control what's happening in my life financially right now. I can only control what I'm doing in the present and trust that things are going to work out. But it doesn't mean I have to tell every single doubt and insecurity that I have, especially to someone who wants to feel safe around me. I have a lot to say in response to that, probably.
I could talk about that forever, but I'm not really sure that's letting go and surrendering. That's me deep diving into relationship dynamic. But I can kind of play it back for the females too, to give like a different thing that maybe they can relate to. And it's going to still have the same moral of your story, just from something more relatable on our side. And that is for the female that's already in a relationship, but wants to get married, especially whenever we're hitting, 30s or 40s. And we're just like, is this ever going to happen? Or is he ever going to propose? Or how do I get to that next step? And you almost feel like, do I need to quit? Do I need to run away? Is this like not working out, or surrendering to like the process? It's that same type of tension. It's that same type of fear that gets brought up, because women at the end of the day, we want to feel safe. Like that's our biggest thing. And that's what was missing in your story as well, is she didn't feel safe. And maybe she wasn't conscious of it. Maybe she knew exactly what was the problem. But at the end of the day, he took away one of the three things that he should be always giving to the female. And safety is part of not only provision, but also protecting and also providing. And I always tell men, I was like, if you don't listen to me about anything when it comes to women, this is your only job. This is the only thing you have to pay attention to. You need to provide, protect, and give provision to this woman, and you'll be fine. So, I love relationships. I love love.
That guy, because I've talked to a lot of guys about this lately, it becomes the fear, because the provision isn't something you can control as far as the resources coming back to you. You can only control what you do to make sure that that happens, which is why if a guy's listening to this and thinking, well, what do you do when you're in an instance where you feel like you don't, the money's not coming in, maybe you're starting a business, maybe you just got hit with a really big bill or something like that. That's where you have to call your power back to you and say, I can't control any of this on the exterior. The only thing I can control is the space that I hold as a man and the courage I show up with and the clarity of mind that I have. And that's all you can do. But that's a form of surrender. And I think a lot of guys don't like the idea of surrender because of that. But if you think of it as calling your power back to you, it's not that you're surrendering. It's kind of like if you were out fighting a war and your army's overextended, and that they're going to, by the time they get, even if they do win the war, they're going to starve by the time they get back, or they're going to get slaughtered. We've got to call them back, kind of like the Spartans did, and put your shields up and just create a place where you can protect what you have left. And then that's the only chance you have of winning. It's the same thing when you're in a difficult spot. As a man, it's like you have to detach yourself from the outcome of the actual resources coming in to provide, and focus the only time you can't be attached to is the present. You can never be too present. You can be attached to the past, to the future, what you hope it's going to be. But surrender means you bring all your power into the present, and that's when miraculous things start happening.
That's where meditation comes into play.
Yes.
Meditation is ultimately being present, being mindful in what is happening right now, whether it's a body scan, whether it's just trying to find clarity of the mind. Like, if you need to truly learn how to let go and surrender, I feel like your easiest tool, even though it takes some work, is learning how to meditate.
Yes. I want to say one thing about that, and I want you to close this out because I want to ask you something that I think everybody's probably wanting to know. But what Air is talking about is what you do on a daily basis to practice the art of surrender. Like, let's say you do it for 15 minutes a day. You focus on something you really want, and then you release it. That's what the ancient shamans taught people to do during their ceremonies, is the intense focus, but also the point of surrender and letting go of it. And if you do that every day with something really simple, then when something comes along that's really hard to let go of, like whether or not the bills are going to be paid next month, or whether or not this person's going to be your person, or whether or not this client is going to close, you're not going to have the mental muscle to deal with it because you haven't trained yourself on a daily basis. It's kind of like if you don't do cardio every day for 3 years and a zombie apocalypse suddenly breaks out. I don't care how much willpower you have. You're going to get eaten because you can't run. You haven't conditioned yourself on a daily basis. So the act of surrender and letting go isn't just something you do when something comes along that you really need to let go of. It's something you do every single day through what Air just talked about. So I want to ask you this. Let's say somebody is in a position where they are attached to some outcome. Like they just are obsessing over it. They can't stop thinking about it. It keeps them awake at night. They wake up in the morning with all kinds of anxiety. And maybe they haven't done the daily work of meditation. And they're wondering, like, how do I get unstuck from where I am right now? What would you do if that was your plan?
We got to reset some thoughts. I will go based off of a personal experience, and then it becomes almost like advice. So it's kind of the what if game when it comes to, okay, this thing is really taking over my life. I can't let it go. I feel like this is what's best for me. This is what I want. Maybe this is even what I need to happen. I kind of play like the what if game with my thoughts. So, okay, what if it crashes all the way down? What would happen next? Okay, well, I would move to Bali and start again, right? Or what if this isn't the man that I end up marrying? Like, what about if he's not the one? Well, I'm going to be a better person and more equipped for the person that is meant to be in my life. What if I can't have children? Okay, well then there's all sorts of other methods. Or maybe I'm supposed to be a mother in a different way or a father in a different way. So starting with that kind of what if game puts you out of that negative mindset into something of possibilities. It's kind of like going back into that 8th dimension or into that wavelength type of way. And it immediately is going to start to dissolve that anxiety to where you can be capable just to take the next step. Because at the end of the day, it's not about conquering that mountain. It's about, can we just get to the next step to get us moving? Manifestation and this whole polarity manifestation equation went down to, can we start to build momentum? And when you start to reset your mind and you start to find new pathways, you're lowering that resistance. So surrendering goes through, okay, how can I find different ways to kind of approach this problem? And what about if I just lose it all, which you've been in that state of mind as well, is like where you've just lost everything. Okay, can I let go of like this finite possibility? Can I let go of this person? Can I let go of this project? Can I let go of this business? Which can be so hard whenever you put so much into it. But at the end of the day, it's more than just that chapter of your life. It's more than just that moment or that decision that you made, whether you think it was a mistake or the best thing that ever happened to you. Like, you have so many more chapters to have in your beautiful book. So it's kind of fun, but the best way to actually look at it is like, okay, holistically, if I'm reading the entire book and not just this one chapter, what's going to happen in this next chapter? And can I let go of that previous page in order to read what happens next?
Yeah, I love that because you're moving back up into the realm of possibility and out of the elapsed realm of like the instance of a thing. And I'll just add that when you do that, because I've done that before, your emotions are going to kick and scream and say, no, it's supposed to be this way. But the whole time you're imagining the what if, what you want doesn't come about. your emotions are going to resist you, but you have to allow them to do that. Don't say, oh, I shouldn't feel that way, or I should go back to thinking the other way because my emotions aren't. Your emotions will catch up if you train your mind.
So, I mean, what if
That's
I'm angry or heartbroken for the rest of my life? Okay. Well, then I'm angry and heartbroken. What do I do with that? Well, I've created a lot of beautiful stories and books based off of that. So there's just so many possibilities out there. Emotional responses, emotions, love.
so that's what you did if you feel stuck.
So
All
you
right.
kind of tell people where they may be able to learn some of these like concepts with us.
Yes, absolutely.
You
You
want
want
to
me
tell?
to tell
Yes, I want you to tell them. I told them last time.
them? And we talked a lot about holding on to baggage and making space for the thing that you really want. And there are times when it can feel like it's impossible to let go of something. Like you may be holding on to something so much, you literally need someone to come along and do this, one thing at a time. And you also need to get yourself out of whatever environment is constantly reinforcing that attachment and making you think that way. And sometimes just shock your brain by going to a different location and having different sensory experiences. And that's why in January 16th through 21st, we're going to be doing something called a Clarity Reset Retreat, which we're inviting people to join us for 5 days in the beautiful Bahamas, where the first thing we're going to do is have a ceremony the first night that's going to absolutely shut down all the anxiety and fear responses that get you stuck in this whirlwind of worry and overthinking, so that you can start listening to that still small voice inside of you that is actually telling you the different possibilities that Eric talked about, and really starting to shed all those old beliefs and let go of them so that you can actually clear your mind and figure out what is it that I really want right now? What's the essence of what I want? Not the specific thing you're attached to. What's the essence? How can I start creating in the 8th dimension again? And that comes from really putting your mind in a place where it has the space to do that. And in everyday life, you don't have the space to do that, which is why we're creating this retreat. We're going to facilitate the whole process. It's going to allow you to slowly let go of the thing that you are holding on to and leave your hand open to the universe to receive something new, and then craft a new and beautiful story about what the next year of your life is going to be like. And that's what the Clarity Reset is about. If you're in a big hurry and want to get started on that process right away before going to the retreat, you can always get with Air about working one-on-one with her.
Oh, I'm going to give you the sign off as well. I'm just in a giving mood today. I think it's because I'm all cozy with my tea.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Good luck with letting go. And we hope that you do join us at our retreat in January. Stay conscious, Miami.
Mhm.